Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jackson Hearth. I want to talk about the brutal truths of living on and off the grid. We're going to look at both the on and off the grid situation when it comes to tiny homes. So, as we go, we've all seen those beautiful videos or Pinterest boards or YouTube videos about the freedom and the zero mortgage and the minimalist life. But that is packed into a really luxurious tiny home. Maybe it's in a village with full hookups and it's tucked away off grid in the woods. Now, the reality though of living and 250 square feet or less, or we could be under 500 square feet, hits the same. Now, we're going to talk about 5 things that you don't see in tours. The first point is the hobby. Now, these are the utilities that could be on or off the grid again. Now, if you're on the grid, your normal house, your utilities are going to be invisible. But the problem is in a tiny house, you may. Now, if you're off grid, you're the power plant manager. You're going to have to do all that stuff. But even if you're on the grid, you have to still monitor the different systems. Now, your home runs usually on 30 to 50 amp services. Now, in a standard home, you have a 200 amp breaker box. Now on an on-grid tiny home living, it means you're playing electrical Tetris. I play that all the time, so I understand. Because sometimes you can't run a space heater or the microwave at the same time. Sometimes you can't run a microwave and a hair dryer. And sometimes you have to really think about things or you're going to trip the breaker. Because you are constantly aware of the load that you are putting on the electricity. What happens if you're off the grid or on the grid and your sewer hose freezes or your water intake leaks? Now again, these are for tiny homes. They're small, not for everybody. So basically, it's like anything else. So for me, I do have full hookups. So I have a septic tank. I have electricity that comes in. But even then, I still am cautious of the amount of electricity, that I'm using, because I don't want to flip the breaker, because you can. Now, I've done it a couple of times in my old house. I have not done it here in my new house. As you can tell, I have a new background. And I'm here in a new house, and I actually technically am not considered tiny because I have 640 square feet, but all that still applies to me. I have to still check that. I literally move my heater to one side while I was using my crock pot so that it stayed warm. But again, this is really life in a tiny house. Now, it's even worse when you're off the grid because you're monitoring. You're trying to figure out how much do I have, how much do I not have, what can I run today. So you're not on the grid, so you're your own power plant manager. You have to manage that power. And these are things that really people don't talk about. Now, another thing that I would like to talk about, point number 2, is going to be the Tetris fatigue. Now, multifunctional furniture is genius and great invention. Now, this is until you have to try to use it 10 times a day. So, for example, I have a nightstand that sometimes doubles as my living room coffee table. I have my desk doubles as my table. So everything that I use usually doubles as something else. Sleeping wise, again, I do have a little bit bigger space, but sometimes you don't. So sometimes you have to pull down your bed because your bed is actually your office space during the day. Or sometimes your bed is your table, or it could be in your kitchen area. Now, sometimes you have to move a pan or a pot to get to your crock pot. You have to move that to get to your toaster oven. So playing Tetris with all of your appliances and all of your different furniture can get tiring. while tiny home living I think is awesome, there are things that I hate, and that's having to keep everything really tight and cozy and put away because you don't have counter space. Now, let's think on a lazy afternoon, it's fine. You don't have to really do anything. You're just relaxing, you're watching TV, you're reading a book. But the problem comes when you're tired and you're sick, or you just don't really care. You've had a long day. Doing what I call the tiny home shuffle, moving things around, trying to get to your crock pot, trying to get to your coffee maker, trying to do that, is just not really what you want to do. It feels exhausting. You're tired of it. Sometimes it gets really irritating. And the thing is, you lose the luxury of leaving things where they were. Because in a tiny house, one place, again, for example, my crock pot was also somewhere where I would put my coffee, where I had my coffee maker. So I had to take my crock pot down and put it up, put my coffee maker up. Now, here's one that really is important, and I found is important to have, and this is point number 3, the humidity trap. So I live here in the state of Alabama, and, it gets very humid here. The problem is we exhale a lot of humidity too. We exhale a lot of moisture. If you were in a 1,500 square foot house, the moisture would dissipate. It would disappear. But you're living tiny. Now, a tiny house, depending on the size, like I said, I have a small house. I'm 640. But my other house was 280. And in there, it sometimes can become a greenhouse. Not only am I living there, but I have 2 other dogs that are also expelling energy, and it would get very hot. And not only that, but you could just tell the moisture. Now, but it's not just your breathing. When you're cooking, when you're showering, it will skyrocket. I have to run a dehumidifier, but I am lucky because I have an air conditioner that also works as a dehumidifier that pulls the moisture out. And that is what you need, either that or a very high-end ventilation system that you will have to be able to run 24/7. Now, this is the thing that I had to cope with. In the winter, in my old house, I had a wood stove. So the wood stove was taking all the water out of the air. In the summer, I ran a dehumidifier / AC unit that pulled it out. You need something that's going to keep that moisture at a very minimum. And if you don't have either of those, you have to get you an exhaust system, because you do not want that moisture to get behind your walls and allow mold to build. Because let me tell you, fighting mold is the hardest thing to do. Not only that, it can make you sick, especially since you're in a small place. And the problem is you start to have problems breathing because of the mold. So that really is important, that you take care and you get the right stuff needed for your tiny home to make sure that you're getting the moisture out. Now, point 4, for me, it was not really a problem, and it's called the social island effect. Now, living in a tiny home, it can be surprisingly lonely sometimes. You can't host dinners. That was fine with me. I don't have a lot of people over. My mom would come, but we would do fine. It was just me and one other person. But if you're a person or a couple that likes to have people over, hosting a party is probably going to be difficult because you're only going to be able to stand because you can't sit. That is also why I also tell people maybe to have an outside place. But if you're looking to host, maybe think about that before you go tiny, and because you're not going to really be able to do that. Now, you probably could figure out a way, but it's probably going to be standing room only. Now, even with the tiny home communities that I live in, my neighbors, we just meet outside, because I feel like, for me, my inside my house is very private. It's a place that only I really come into. It's a place where I can be myself. It's a place for my dogs to not have to worry. They can relax. It's my, how do I call it, my sanctuary. It's a place that with my spiritual life that I don't invite a lot of people in. I will invite some people in every now and then if they want to see it, but we don't really hang out here. My socializing is usually done outside. We'll meet maybe by a fire pit, or maybe we'll bring out a table and we'll sit out there and eat together. But that is where you're really going to do. You're going to do a lot of your living. You're going to do a lot of your socializing outside, not inside your house. Now, the other problem is if you have a guest stay. Let's say you have, maybe you're married, your sister comes, your brother comes, you want to see your nephew, or whatever. Now, this means that someone's going to be sleeping on the couch, or someone's going to be sleeping in the bathtub. There's going to be inconveniences because sometimes the tiny homes, you don't have the luxury of having enough space for visitors. But I am lucky. I do have 2 lofts that were built into my home. But there's some homes that don't. So you just have to figure out a way. Maybe you buy a couch that doubles as a pull-out. Maybe you buy a recliner that someone can sleep in. Or maybe you have it where you can put hammocks that you can hang. There are all sorts of things that you can do. While this is the truth, I'm telling you, and the bad side of things, or people may think, I think they can also be good things. I think if you really want this lifestyle, these are things you're going to have to look at. Now, again, we talked about living with a partner. Now, here's the problem. Living in a closed space, maybe even 640 square feet is not a lot. So when I have my mom here or something, it gets kind of tight because I'm so used to being by myself. If you're living all the time with someone, you really need to like that person. You need to, and obviously if they're your spouse, you do love them because there's no way to get away from them, especially if it's raining outside like it is today. Today in Alabama, it's raining. So if you had an argument, there's no way you're going to be able to get away because you're stuck inside. Now, if you have something outside, sometimes you just have to put on that raincoat, get that umbrella, and go for a walk to cool off. That's just the things, is there's no room to escape each other. So you're going to be living, sometimes maybe working, eating, cooking. You're going to do everything together, and you're going to be really close. So if there is an argument, there needs to be, and you need to make plans before you move in. What are we going to do if this happens? Because life isn't all rainbow and unicorns all the time. There are those rocky times, and they come and go like everything else. So don't let that get in the way. Don't let that hinder you, but do have a plan set up for when those things happen. Now, here is what I like to call point 5, the zoning gray area. Now, this here is probably the biggest secret. It's finding a place to put your home. That can be a nightmare. That can be horrible. Because where I moved from, Georgia, there is nowhere to go. There's nowhere to put it because the laws do not account for it. So you need to look at your zoning laws. Some land has a minimum square footage. Where I used to live, you had to have 4 acres and 1,150 square feet. That was the law. You couldn't be smaller than 1,150 square feet. Now, even if, let's say, so this is even if you have full utilities. I mean, the city, the county, they don't really care. They want you to abide by the law because that's the law. It's legal for them to live in, and they haven't gotten to the point to where they really want to utilize tiny homes in some areas, in some states. But I will tell you, especially if you're on wheels, that is really bad. So if you have a tiny home on wheels, there are some areas where you can't live more than 30 days. There are some days you can't live more than you have to have plans to build a house for those specs, whatever your minimum zoning is in most areas. But I have been lucky enough to really find a place to live, and I'm going to tell you that just in a second. But the legal gray areas, because your neighbors are going to, these things you might be okay for a while. So say you put one in the back of your parents' yard, and they live in a place where you can't have that. Technically, you could get reported. They could get reported to the county, and they could see things. So you don't want to get an eviction notice. You don't want to get anybody in trouble. So what I would do and what I would suggest is that you call your local planning department, your local zoning, and ask about the ADUs. Now, ADUs are accessory dwelling units. These could be tiny homes, or it could be mother-in-law suites, but I don't want you to put your dream home, I don't want you to put your tiny home somewhere where it can't be parked and you be told you can't live here. Then you're going to be stuck trying to find a place. So please contact your local zoning laws. Now, I spoke a few minutes about a place I found. So there's a place in Jasper, Alabama called Prestige Country Cottages. Really think that it's a great place. I love it here. I've been here for almost a month. I have my tiny house. It's brand new. There's only a total right now that have purchased. About 4 people have purchased. So there's still lots available, plenty of lots. It's beautiful, gated. So please look at that. Again, I will put a link in the description of this video to go look at it. They do have a Facebook page. And if you need to, you can always get in touch with me and I can get you in touch with the owners. But what I want to say, as in closing, what I want to say is I'm not saying not to do this. I want you to open your eyes to what real life is. It's not sometimes those pictures of everything. I want you to really think about it. I want you to really dive deep and look to see what needs to be done, right? I want you to look to see what needs to happen. Now, this is whether you're going to use plug-ins on the grid or whether you're going to live off grid. It's going to have to be a lifestyle that's designed around you, your habits, your loves. Now, it is hard. Sometimes it's weird, and sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's cluttery. Sometimes you just can't keep things straight. But for the right person, and it's potentially you, it's worth every square inch. It's worth it. It's worth it downsizing. It's worth it going through things. It's worth it sometimes being your own power manager. Sometimes it's worth having to go through the issues of Tetris when you're trying to find somewhere to sleep or somewhere to sit, or trying to find your blender, or trying to find your crock pot. It's worth every bit, and I would not change it. So until next time, from our heart to yours, thank you.